wyd gesweef. Die lied van 'n volk se ontwaking, wat harte laat sidder en beef.
Ek smoeg vir die vrese waarmee ons moet lewe, vir guns en vir moord en vir rape. Ek smoeg vir die bad news, vir Zuma en sy views, van ons op TV moet kyk. Ek wil nie meer hoor hoe ons tieners begrawe, oor niemand hul steur aan die wet. Ek wil nie meer lees van affirmative action, of beklei om te hou wat ek het. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Ek stiek vir Malema, sy leuns en sy sê maar, ons hou maar ons mond en betaal. Ons kruip weg in kampe, word blind vir die rampe, en bid dat die Heer ons omhaal. Daar's Winnie Mandela, wat mense verbrand het, maar nou wil sy huil in haar hand. Die staatskas is leeg en die ANC jeug saai verwoesting en pyn deur ons land. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Het betaal vir die grond, waar sy kinders se kinders kan bly. Maar sy huis en sy lande is nou in die hande van die vyand teen wie hy moes stry. Ons kinders verstaan nie, waar kom al vandaan nie, hul erfenis is uitgewis. Geen volkslied of vlag nie, en geen erewag nie, vir die helde wat daar nie meer is. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers tot plesie en 'n tellery, wat lief sing en skryf en stry, voor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. En ons reg om hier te kan bly.
Welcome to Radio Free South Africa, broadcasting on Reach Out America on the World Integrity News Network. This is your host, Karin Smith. Today, I think possibly for the first time in my life, I am ashamed to be a South African. The song we have just sung by Sunette Bridges is Genoeg, which means, translated into English, enough. Well, I think that's where I'm at today. I've had enough. I try to the best of my ability on all my shows, no matter where I talk, to avoid the words I and me, because my shows essentially are about South Africa. They're about the minority whites in South Africa and how very much they need assistance from the rest of the world. Well, I have spent the last 2 years getting that assistance from the rest of the world. I've neglected my home. my husband, my family, my grandchildren. My health in particular has suffered immensely through the number of hours that I sit in front of a computer planning these shows and getting guests, organizing, whatever. And then I have gotten American people to pay for the networks that we work on, to organize the shows, pay out of their own pockets because they believe in the South African cause. Unfortunately, it would appear to me that the South Africans do not have the same dedication to their cause. Last week, we booked the show, and my guest did not turn up. To this day, I have not had an apology or an excuse about why they were not there. So I am at a loss to work out what I, as a human being, can do for South Africans if they are not prepared to do for themselves. Today our guest is Henri Riche. He is having some internet issues apparently, but I am trying to contact him.
Hello, Karin.
Hello, Henri. You're live on Radio Free South Africa. How are you doing today? Hello? Henri says he is having some serious internet issues at the moment, which is unfortunate. It happens all the time in South Africa. But as I was saying, I spend an awful lot of time every week parked in front of my PC, reading up on the latest in South Africa, finding worthwhile guests that I think will be of interest and have a story to tell to the rest of the world. If these same guests cannot bother to make an appearance on the show from South Africa with little or no excuse, how can I make apologies for them? How can I keep on saying that there's load shedding in South Africa? Oh, there's a problem in South Africa. Henri?
Hi, Karin. I'm sorry. Looks like we're having a few problems tonight, but hopefully we'll get this through.
Okay, good. Thank you. I was just going into a spiel about how people like yourself have genuine problems getting on air, and we all accept that. But my guest last week didn't have a problem, had no excuse, has not apologized, and I'm mad because I have gotten the trust of American people who have taken our cause to their hearts, who pay for these shows to go on air, and then the South African people that we are fighting for can't be bothered to come on air and do their bit. How does one explain that to a kind American?
Yes, I totally agree with you. That can totally be frustrating.
You know, Bobby Biesinger very kindly took our cause to heart. He's not a rich man. He pays for the Blog Talk channel. He pays for the World Integrity News Network. And all he expects from us is to be there when our show is supposed to go live. Now, if I know that somebody can't come on air, or like yourself, I saw that...
Yes.
You know, I saw you were having internet problems, so I can prepare something to fill the time. But if people just don't pitch, it is so rude and so lacking commitment to your cause.
I totally agree, and that really frustrates me as well. I mean, it's just common decency, and I think, in just the worldwide phenomena, and even South African phenomena, people tend to lose those general courtesy as things get tougher. I don't understand that, but it is frustrating. I totally understand.
Henri, I'm tearing my hair out. I try so hard, as I said at the beginning of the show, not to say I and me and whatever on these shows, because the show is not about me. It is about the people in South Africa that so desperately need help. But I give up so much of my life to try and assist the white minority in South Africa who so desperately need help. But what am I supposed to do if they don't want to help themselves? Sorry, that was just a bit of a rant. Henri.
I know what you're talking about. It's very frustrating. Yes.
And it's very hard to explain to my American sponsors what is going on, because I can't tell them. I don't know. I still don't know what happened to our guest last week. And so you're left with 2 hours booked and paid for of dead time. It is really bad manners, guys. And I try so hard to bring you guests who have got a story to tell, have something worthwhile to say that will interest you and tug at your heartstrings and make you understand how bad things are in South Africa today. And I just want to beat my head against a wall when those self-same people can't come on and tell their story.
No.
So, Henri, today there was Paul's birthday, and there was a march at the Paul Kruger statue in Church Square. Now, this week that statue was once again defaced with green paint. Have you heard anything about that?
I totally agree. It's just unacceptable.
Oh, I'm so angry. Henri, I'm so angry. I give up my entire life for this.
And I just know about the green paint.
Yes. Well, they've been painted green, and apparently there was...
Yeah. Now, I know about that green paint incident on the foot of the statues.
I've seen some pictures of the wreath laying today.
It looks like we're going to go across... You can talk, Karin.
I've seen some pictures of the wreath laying today. From the pictures, I can't see whether it was well attended or not, but I'm very proud of my South African people who are making a point of cleaning up these statues and showing these heroes the honor that they deserve.
Oh, totally. I mean, people are trying to, pull together around these statues because it represents our identity. And, if you attack our statues, you inadvertently, you're attacking who we are, and we're part of this country. And if you don't want our statues in this country, it means you don't want us in the country.
Yes. And no matter what they say, I saw a speech by Zuma, a very long, very complicated speech. But part of the speech was that Afrikaans and Afrikaners are as South African as the rest of the country. Now, it's all very well for him to say that in a speech, but in reality, that is not where that man is at, is it? Because at that same Alachotla or whatever he was at this week, he sang, "Bring me my machine gun to shoot the Boers." So how can he sing that song in one breath? And in another breath say, oh, well, the Afrikaners are as much a part of South Africa as everybody else. These people, and Malema did the same kind of thing recently. He said that black and white must live in peace together, but we are going to nationalize everything and take your land away from you. So how do you, as a South African, how do you put these two totally opposite end of the scale things together? What does one believe to be the truth?
Well, you know what they say, bulldog baffles brains, if I can put it mildly, Karin.
Yes.
You know, and I think probably that's what he's hoping for, you know.
Is that people will just be
But
fooled and believe.
for me, I mean, I'm intelligent. Yes, they totally believe. Some of the people will believe anything. They just hear one side of his speech where he's saying, "Oh, but Afrikaners are part of South Africa," and people hear that and they think, "Oh, what a nice guy," and they don't hear the other part of maybe where he sang the "Bring Me My Machine Gun" song,
Yes.
because maybe it's not broadcast on radio or television. So it's just a one-sided thing. So it's also about perception, you know.
And they're doing a very good job, aren't they? I mean, they have done since before the end of apartheid. They had a much better media campaign and media story than we have ever had.
Oh, yes. And I mean, they also want to censor the media now more and more, because the media is probably in a way critical of, or not really critical, but they're actually exposing or saying more what these guys are saying, and the ANC is not liking that. So they definitely want to censor the media. I mean, there's already talks about it, and you can see the ANC regime is quite angry of the perception, because they can see they're not going to stay long in power, because people are starting to see what type of people they are, what type of party they are. They're not this goody party that fights for human rights and people loved like in the old apartheid days. These guys just fooled the people abroad, and they fooled them successfully, but they cannot keep up this facade.
Would you say that is because of alternative media on the internet that is actually because the mainstream media, it still seems to be in the ANC's pocket?
Oh, totally. It's alternative media that's actually exposing this, and I think we've got a lot of success currently, because we are running a shadow media broadcasting, company, if you want to call it that, because the mainstream is not talking for us. So I think we're making a lot of headway with exposing this and informing people and getting the word out. So, and I think they hate that. The left hates it. The mainstream media hates it. And because the mainstream media just mainly plays political correctness games, and alternative media just says it how it is, and they're actually exposing a lot of the truth.
And that is why South Africa is trying so hard to squeeze the internet, to close it to you, to censor it, to do anything they can to shut people like yourself down.
Oh, yes. People, I mean, a government don't like the truth. They don't want people to think critically. They don't want alternative views. They just want people to conform, whether it's in the US or anywhere else or in South Africa. Everybody should just think the same. And to think the same, you shouldn't have alternative views or people criticizing or actually people telling things. You just give a mild type of story that pleases everybody. And we don't do that. And it's becoming more apparent with people in the US that's also speaking up, because they're seeing the same things we see
as you can hear, people, we have some
in their country. And you can already run parallels what's happening in South Africa and in the US. So everywhere, I think our numbers. Oops. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here, Henri.
Karin, I'll just call you. Okay.
I'll call you
Sorry,
back.
you were saying?
I'll call you back because you're fading in and out. Sorry, people, as you can hear, our line to South Africa is not good. They have amongst the worst internet in the world. So the fact that we even get one of them on is a minor miracle.
Okay. Let's see how long this one lasts.
Yeah, I've just been saying it's so typical of South Africa. You have amongst the worst internet in the world.
Tell me about it. And we don't know where this internet is going. We're supposed to have this on the same par as everybody else, but we're paying the same amount of what people pay in the US or UK, but we're not getting the same quality of internet.
No, it's so frustrating. Henri, yes, you were drawing parallels between the US and South Africa because President Obama this week said he's going to sign, I don't know whether he has or not, but he said he's going to sign an executive order to deny the press the right to name shooters in mass shootings or rapists, or in other words, you may not name or say what race or whatever a criminal is. Now, that has been the case in South Africa for many years, has it not?
Yes, and it's many of the, all of the articles or crime reports doesn't give the race at all. Sometimes, if you know what it would give somebody's name, and Afrikaners have a certain way of their names, and Africans have a certain way how their names are spelled. So we sometimes know, all right, that probably in all the cases, the attackers are black. Probably 1%, if that ever happens, that maybe there was some kind of family feud or something. It might be a white person, but that rarely happens. Most cases, if not all, is black on white attacks here, and they never say the race. It's just two males, and I know that what made us different from the US or UK was even in the UK they tell the race of the person. It's just in South Africa where this was done, so it wouldn't come as a surprise if that's going to be done in the US now, because the US just mimics what's happening with what the left is doing in South Africa. The left just mimics in the US.
Isn't it amazing, Henri, that for years, people like yourself and myself have been saying to the world, put a spotlight on South Africa because that is your future. It is coming to your country.
Yep.
Look at what is happening and stop it before it starts. And yet nobody paid attention, did they?
No, but that's probably human psychology again. When life is good, everything, you don't really worry about the warnings people give you. But now that things are starting to go a bit bad in the US, and then, for us in South Africa, it's just deja vu. We can see all that stuff happening there. It's just the same as what's been happening to us. And the tougher it's going to get, the more Americans will wake up. And if Americans start waking up, they need to start taking notice. Because I always tell people, if you want to know what's going to happen in the US, know what's happening in South Africa. If you know what's happening in South Africa, you will know what's going to happen in the US before it happens. So that is very important. If people know what's happening in South Africa, because we are ahead in so many ways of what the left is using with their ideology and all these laws they put in place. I think it's a little microcosm of a testing ground, in other words, before it's implemented in the US or other Western countries.
Absolutely, Henri, because I've always thought that South Africa is a test case, and if they can get away with it there, with nobody paying attention, then it's going to spread to the rest of the world. It was a wonderful experiment. It was perfectly successful because it's been going on for 20-plus years, and nobody's looking at it. So if you take a look at Europe now, overrun And it's not just hundreds of thousands anymore. It is millions, because I believe 1.4 million Muslim refugees are in Germany alone, never mind the rest of Europe. 1.4 million. Now, it is happening in other white countries so fast that they're overwhelmed by it, whereas in South Africa it was a slow advancement of these things, little steps at a time to see whether have we stepped beyond the bounds this time. Is somebody going to stop us now? But nobody did. Nobody did. So they know the big picture will work, and they're doing it on an enormous scale to the rest of the white world. I think we may have lost.
Yes.
We haven't lost.
And no, it's gonna be hard bones we're gonna crunch, Karin. I think we might look like we've lost, but I think once people wake up, then things will start happening. But people won't wake up when life is good. And even though with Afrikaners, what I usually say with us in South Africa, leaders don't come forward when life is easy. We really show what we're about when life is hard. Life is still people.
But Henri, life in South Africa is no picnic for white people right now. I know that there are the elite, well-off, the upper class that still have a really good life. But in general, the life of the minorities in South Africa, that includes the Indians, the Coloureds, the Khoikhoi, none of those people are having a good life. So no,
you're absolutely right. And I would probably just add there, when I say people are having a good life, I probably more mean the upper class of these whites, because they are the ones that criticize us when we speak out about this, because they don't want you to interfere with their little utopia of their life that's in a nice little bubble of their riches. So, but as soon as they join the party, things will start to happen, and their life is still good. The little line of upper classes. So,
all right. So, Henri, I've read 2 articles this week that really disturbed me. It has disturbed me for a very long time. The fight about who is a Boer, who is an Afrikaner, and should the English exist at all. Now, I read a couple of articles this week that if I had any tears left, I would cry them, but I don't have them. About that they should be the self-determination, but only for the Boer. So who is a Boer? I have not yet found a proper definition of why all South African many-generation white people are not South Africans. Why are we splitting us up? The already small number of people are now being split up into even smaller groups of people. What chance does anybody in that country have if we are fighting amongst ourselves about who's acceptable and who deserves to live?
No, you're absolutely right, Karin, and I tend to not get too involved with people talking about the Boer and the Afrikaner and the English and all that, because I know it splits people up. It's not, it doesn't unify us at all. I believe I grew up as a Boer, but I'm also willing to say I'm Afrikaner. I'm also willing to say I'm English. I'm also willing to say many things just to keep that unity, because over these centuries we mixed with so many people. We are all one, and it's I do not like to go into these political questions or things people start talking about to try and turn into a Boer, Afrikaner, or English conversation. It just doesn't help us at all.
No, it doesn't, Henri, because what I keep looking at is the numbers. even if you have 4 million whites left in South Africa, and that's kind of a middle figure because they say between 3.5 and 4.5 million. So if we take a 4 million figure of whites, and we've got 1 million of them living in, incredibly bad circumstances. I hate the word squatter camps because that makes it sound as if they're doing it willingly, and they're squatting on property where they do not belong, and they're doing the black African thing, which they are not. So I don't know what word we would use for it, but I hate the word squatter camp. Now, if you've got a quarter of your population, of the white population, living in destitution like that, what good is it doing the rest of us to split ourselves up into tiny little groups and well, you don't belong to me because it doesn't work for me, and it's not going to work for the country.
No, you're absolutely right. Some people are ignorant about, how diverse we are as white people. They don't know their own history. That adds to all this. I know where the whole thing Boer Afrikaner came from. I totally understand that. But trying to talk in that direction for our future is just not going to work. You alienate people because a lot of Afrikaners probably are Boer descendants. Many Boer descendants are Afrikaners, but these two groups don't even know because they don't know their history. And a lot of these people are young people. They just see themselves again as Afrikaners, but they might be totally 100% Boers. But it all comes down to history, what we know, how we know our identity. And going forward, that type of talk is usually sometimes people that's trying to stir, divide between people, or maybe even, I don't want to say, but even agents of people that is not Afrikaners or Boers at all.
Yeah, I agree. Because for me, Henri, we are South Africans. We are outnumbered 10 to 1, if not more than that, by other races. And we need to hold hands, say we are white South Africans. We, together with the Indians, together with the coloreds, we are minorities who do not have a voice. And we need to increase our numbers and stand up against this injustice.
Yes, and I think we're going to get a lot of support. Like I mentioned last time, I know the Freedom Front Plus is joining forces with the colored people in Cape Town. There's, I think it's Peter Murray. He's a colored man. That's the leader of this new political party, or maybe a minority party. And they are joining forces with the Freedom Front. So that's already a good sign of the way they're thinking strategically, how to go forward as a minority, because numbers as a minority, you might become a little majority of in your own right, if I can say so.
Yes, I get that completely, because a split up in any way, it doesn't matter how the split works. If there are splits and factions, you are never going to be successful. It's a numbers game. I mean, you see that in South Africa with BBBEE. It's a numbers game. I mean, it doesn't matter whether your company makes a profit or doesn't make a profit, or has the best people in charge, and in sport as well, where it doesn't matter how good you are. It's a numbers game. You have to have X number of other races there. So unless the white people join hands together with the other minorities and increase their numbers, they really have little hope of succeeding in what they're trying to do.
Absolutely. And interestingly, I don't know if you saw the trade union, Afrikaner trade union called Solidarity, is starting to implement or going to implement a plan B to save the Afrikaner and Afrikaans-speaking people. Now, Afrikaans-speaking people, as you know, is whites, can be Indians, coloreds, and even black people. So we want to, by focusing on Afrikaans, we can hopefully save the Afrikaner as one of the minority groups in the future. And I think they've set aside 3.5 or 3.8 billion rand
I saw that.
to look. Yeah, so that looks very promising in a strategic way. But we'll have to see what's going to happen. There's already many noises being made from disgruntled groups, either from the government or pro-government groups, whatever. They don't like the idea, and of course they won't like the idea. But hopefully this will go somewhere. And then again, this was not the first time we've done this. We did this after the Boer War. And after, I think it was after, just before the First World War, where the Afrikaner had to build up its own banks, build up its own social organizations looking after poor people and all these type of things. Because after the Boer War, we were, nobody had money. The Boer Afrikaner group of people were just on the ground. They just didn't have any money left. So they had to build their way up by pulling up from their own shoestrings without any help from anybody else. And I think we're at that point again where we'll have to do this before we totally have nothing left. We have to help ourselves. And I'm very glad that Solidarity is finally taken, came to this point. I don't know, maybe it was in planning for quite a while, but sometimes it feels like you or a lot of people warned and then tried to talk to these people in leadership positions, but they didn't listen. But so hopefully we'll be going somewhere with this thing of solidarity.
Yes, it is a very good sign to me, because after the Boer War, the farmer was left with his farm burnt down, his cattle slaughtered or run off or fed to the British. His wife and kids either died in a concentration camp or came out of there so ill and suffering from such severe malnutrition that it took generations to even begin to build up the Afrikaner as a nation again, because they were decimated by that war.
Yes.
However, they are in that same situation today, because if these people in the camps are not helped by yourselves, and not uplifted from that desperation, you're in exactly the same situation. You are going to lose another 20 to 25% of your people over the next couple of years.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, all these organizations the Afrikaners built up into powerhouses of Africa, the ANC regime took them over and pumped them full of affirmative action and black economic empowerment laws, and they're in control of these organizations now. So we have to start from scratch again. So they just took what we've made into a success, and they took it, and now we sit with nothing.
Is there the will, do you think, Henri? Because I'm watching from a distance, and I'm wondering whether the will, as we spoke earlier, while people still live in their little gated communities and are safe from looking at these things or it touching them, is there the will amongst the people who really could help financially to give that needed help and to build up something to save the Afrikaner?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think there would be such, people would want to help. But I think before they would want to help is we need that leadership from leaders, from these leaders in these organizations or these organizations themselves. But, you get that divide again, like we spoke about earlier. Then some people will support Solidarity and some people won't support Freedom Front Plus, and I say, like we said last time, I don't have to agree 100% with somebody, but I support all positive Afrikaner initiatives. I support all positive Afrikaner political parties. I don't have to agree with all of them, but there's my people are in those parties, and I support those initiatives because we need opportunities. We need more than one option.
Absolutely.
And even if we have 5 options, if one of those options work, but we need options, but we need to support all options.
Yes, we do. We do. And all right, so you don't agree 100%. There's 3 points in my manifesto you don't agree with. Well, we can work through that later. But for now, we need to join hands and have one loud voice instead of 100 little mouth squeaks.
Yes, and I think maybe it's a learning curve as well, Karin. Over generations, we Afrikaners also tend to go against each other, and which is sad, And if one guy has something and the other guy don't have something, some people are happy when you don't have anything and they won't even help you. But then again, you get many people that will help you. It's probably just getting that common ground of similar people, getting everybody to think in a certain direction. So there's maybe a learning curve, education involved.
But Henri, how are we going to provide that education? Because it's not going to be in the schools.
What we lack is that
sorry, folks, we appear to have lost Henri again. This is a very difficult line, and he keeps falling in and out.
Leadership. They're not catered for as a minority because you don't have a right as a white.
Let me just try and call Henri back and see if we can get a better line, because this is we can't hear him and he has a very important message. I'm having some difficulty reconnecting. If you will just have some patience with us, please, folks. Henri is a staunch patriot who does an amazing amount of writing, blogging, talking for our South African people. And his message is very important to be heard by the world. Unfortunately, he's not in a very populated area. And as I've already said, internet in South Africa is amongst the worst in the world. So you can imagine in some little rural area, it is going to be even worse. So we will just keep on trying to reach him. But the message today, as my message always attempts to be, is that we have to forget about our small differences, join together to give. Are you there, Henri? There we go. Maybe. Hi, are you there?
Hi, Karin. Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
there again.
Yeah, this is fun.
So where were we?
Yeah, you were talking about how important it is to join hands, and also how much you believe people are willing to help. We just need a unified message and a leader.
Definitely, and you know what? People are also kind of with the head in the sand approach, because they know how bad the situation is. They rather do not want to know what's going on anymore, so they don't want to listen to news, or they don't want to listen to maybe, if a leader comes, they probably wouldn't even want to listen to a leader. So, you have that worry because things are getting to such a point now that people just do not want to get involved. They just want to focus on their lives and not know about any negativity anymore, which is understandable. But from a survival point of view, of course, it's not a very smart move.
No, but I do believe that every South African has some form or other of PTSD, black or white. It doesn't matter your color. I do believe that in South Africa there is an absolute stress level that people cannot live with, and it's been building and building and building. why you would step back and put your head in the sand, because you cannot take any more without going insane.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, even if you live in a city, I remember when I was living overseas, coming after leaving South Africa, it's a kind of a relief, because in South Africa you don't even notice it, but you're always on alert, and you always want to look over your shoulder, because you've got to be alert. Something might happen. You've got to make sure everything is locked. Everything, don't forget not to lock anything. Or did you forget this? Or did you close your window? So it does work on you eventually, that thought pattern. And you only realize it when you're overseas, and then things are not like that anymore. And then you realize how bad things are, really.
I know, Henri, when I got to the States, it was such a shock to me, more than the culture shock that I suffered. The freedom shock was so enormous. Not to have walls around your house, not to have burglar bars on your windows, not to lock your car doors. I thought these people were insane to live like that.
Yeah. But I mean, we also lived like that under apartheid. And I mean, many people, black people, was even safer under apartheid than they are now. I can't even think it was under apartheid this bad across the country. Maybe certain sectors of South Africa, like Johannesburg, but now it's evenly spread with crime.
It is, and the latest crime statistics are, for me, I don't believe a word of it. Number one, they are worse than they have ever been, but I still don't believe what is put out by the government, because there was an article from a mortuary, and their figures are totally different from those put out by the government. So who do you believe, the people that are dealing with the bodies, or the people who need a good story to tell?
Yeah, totally. And then I'm sure this government, they want to show a perception to the world, and like they're in control, but they're not in control. It's a failed government. It's time they need to go. Opposition party needs to take over. But like I said last time, the question is, will this government go without violence? I don't think so.
No, I don't, because I read this week, in fact, I read an article this morning that the ANC membership is falling, but drastically. No, not by little 0.5%. It's falling drastically. Now, they are not going to accept that, because the guys who are entrenched at the top, who are making billions off of this whole situation, they are not going to go quietly into that dark night.
No, of course not. And I mean, they're in the South African government, again, they're in an alliance with the South African Communist Party. And I would rather say it's the South African Communist Party that's more controlling this country, because they got the numbers. And I can't think of any Marxists or communists that's going to let go of this great opportunity where they're in power of a country like this. And I mean, it would seem like all these guys, these left-wing communists and Marxists all over the world, is working together now. And now being in power, it's easier for them to help their chums or their friends in other countries to get into power that were freedom fighters or whatever. So they would not want to let go of this position, because they can help their other friends to get into power in other countries.
Yes, and then you have these people who are on the UN Human Rights Council, whose country is doing the worst atrocities in the world, and yet he's voted in to the Human Rights Council. So what hope is there for the rest of us when absolute dictators and tyrants are in charge of the human rights across the world?
Yeah, no, these human rights has been all infiltrated by left-wing organizations. It's like, right-wing people don't have human rights. It's just you have to, heaven forbid if you're right-wing. And your human rights are infringed. You just don't exist. Like I mentioned last time, one such organization I couldn't say because I was a member of it is Amnesty International. They're not interested in white people, for instance, in South Africa having human rights issues because they do not fit the left-wing picture of what a human rights victim should be like. And that's the way these organizations are going at the moment. They beating the drum because if Afrikaners were black people, for example, and anything happened to them the same way that it happens to some black people, these organizations would be up in arms. But they're not. And that's really, that shows the bias of many of these organizations. But then again, if you live in certain countries and you don't know what's happening in other countries, you just accept these organizations as legitimate and without question.
Henri, if you were a member of Amnesty International,
yes.
Nobody can say they don't know what is happening in South Africa.
Well, history will judge them because Amnesty International has been told many times what's happening. They are well aware of what's happening. So when eventually something does happen, they shouldn't come and say, yeah, but we didn't know. They know very well what's happening, but they're playing a political correct game. And I usually say they're like a little sexy ballerina. They just dance around in little sexy toes, whatever's sexy. And they skip anything that's unsexy. And apparently, being white and being a victim is very unsexy.
Apparently so, because yes, South Africa is our focus because we care about what is going on in South Africa. But the rest of the world is finding out that it's unsexy to be white and to be endangered.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, that's just a global phenomenon of Marxism that's taken hold. And as you know, we've maybe discussed this before, we won the war against communism when the Berlin Wall fell. But we lost against Marxism. And this is what we see worldwide. And if you think about it, Marxism comes from Russia. These guys developed, they perfected Marxism, but they exported it to all the enemies. And the enemies is together the West. So you want to make your enemy fall and crumble. So you don't implement an ideology in your own country if it was meant for your enemy. And if you look at Russia currently, they're making all the right noises. I'm not saying they actually doing it, but I mean the stuff Putin says about being pro-family, pro-Christian, and all these stuff goes against Marxism. So which makes me wonder. These guys they exported Marxism to our countries to let our countries crumble, and now they can pick up and become the next world policeman, like what we see now with Putin with ISIS.
Yes. Yeah, and then you see that the other thing that poor South Africans are facing, and facing it bigger every day. We spoke about it last time. The whole BRICS alliance. If you have got Russia, India, and China in your corner, you're practically invulnerable to anything that the rest of the world thinks.
Oh, yes. And even, if you think about it with BRICS, Nigeria is stronger than South Africa now. So Nigeria should actually be one of the BRICS. So the question remains then, how did we South Africans become part of the BRICS when we shouldn't really be there? So there was probably some kind of deal with China, maybe with resources, to supply China with resources or whatever, to get that position as part of the BRICS. I don't know, but anything's possible.
And the Russian influence with nuclear-powered power stations, now that is frightening, because as you're seeing with the whole Iran question right now, and the nuclear power, we're signing this agreement to allow them to have it for peaceful purposes. But if you believe that, then I've got a seaside plot in the Namib Desert to sell to you, really.
Yeah.
Because that is not the case.
Yeah, you don't know what other dealings might be going on where you know, it could be that they're just saying that you're just using the nuclear deal as a cover-up for something else. You know, yeah, you can say it's a conspiracy theory, but anything's possible with this government. And you know, even to be fair, even the apartheid government did similar things, and that's why I also know why would this government be any different. I would even think they would be more up to no good than the previous one, because as things are getting tougher, they're going to do more scalier things to keep in power. You know, by hook or by crook.
Absolutely, but you know what the worry is with that particular deal? If South Africa's government cannot maintain coal-fired power stations, what is the hope that those nuclear ones are going to be run correctly, safely? No, they'll be run by Russians or Chinese, whoever wins the contract in the end, and they already brought in Chinese armed people to protect their own people, and they're talking about putting in a turning Walfish Bay over to the Chinese to have a Chinese military camp outside it, etc. So what are the chances that these 4 or 5 nuclear-powered power stations are not going to create a meltdown like Fukushima or Chernobyl?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And like you say, they'll probably have to have foreign people to man these stations, because if you look at some of the towns in South Africa where the people, where the town has to dump its rubbish, it looks, I don't know how a fourth world country looks like, but I imagine I've been to third world countries, but some of these places, you know, these municipalities run by the ANC regime, you should see these places. They're not looked after. You know, you cannot think how they can let people live in these circumstances. Like I mentioned before, you know, I see a lot of poor people, black people that's becoming poorer, you know, on top of, I mean, already know white people is poor and we are struggling. But, you know, black people are struggling too, and they're not really helping the black people, and they should. But it just shows you somewhere their management is just horrendous, and they've got this little cream of the crop people at the top, and they're just getting richer and richer and richer, and more people are getting poorer, and then more people are getting desperate, and people are taking it out on each other, and there's no the communities are drifting apart, you know, and it is, I think, I mean, race relations in many respects is probably much, much worse than it's ever been.
Well, I don't know if you know who Menzi Solomon is.
I heard of him, yeah.
Okay. So now, he is a black man in South Africa, very well educated, a very good businessman. And I read an opinion piece by him yesterday, which really touched my heart. So I would like to read it, and then I'd like to get your input on it. It is headed My Opinion of Scapegoat Racism. It's by Menzi Solomon Shangi. Now, he is an incredible man. Definition of racism: prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Most blacks are deeply racist. Now, this man is black himself, so please don't throw the racist thing at me. Most blacks are deeply racist and want whites to leave South Africa, whether they admit it or not. I know, because this feeling emanates from many of my family, friends, co-workers, church members, most everyone I interact with on a daily basis. Their words may not say it, but I see the reflection of it in their eyes. Sometimes inadvertently it slips out in subtle ways through their actions or inaction. Am I the only one to observe and admit this? I disagree vehemently with this deeply ingrained and pervasive racism and the continual denial thereof by my people. Our black people's frustration is focused in the wrong areas. The whites are not the source of our problems. We are. This scapegoat racism does not sit well with me, and we are quickly self-destructing with our quick trigger blaming of others. We must be more vigilant against this, especially with our history. Mandela warned us of falling into the scapegoat racism trap. Even though I don't agree with all of Mandela's philosophies, he was right about this. The numbers of blacks who exhibit racist feelings are increasing as socialism takes hold, and as the number of uneducated black people increases. Further economic decline will likely accelerate this slow sinking into the racism trap. This concept of economic freedom seems to mean eliminate private enterprise, which will result in a large number of companies divesting themselves of South Africa, which will not free us, but will shackle us further into poverty and result in an amplification of racist feelings. Killing white farmers, while I don't think this is an organized campaign, will probably continue and will be difficult to stop. Unfortunately, there are not enough influential people and vocal enough leaders to make this stop. An unfortunate validation of racism ingrained at the highest levels. Regardless of the color of the victims, the thousands of murders per year is horrific and unacceptable in today's society. White farmers must defend themselves in whatever way necessary from these horrific racist murder sprees. National media may help briefly by putting a national spotlight on this, but will offer little long-term reprieve. The overall trend is looking bad, and if I were white with sufficient resources, I would make plans to protect against the worst, especially if OPEC continues to drive crude prices down, causing significant long-term global economic volatility. Further continuation of the take-what-we-can philosophy and the extremist racist views heard echoing in the hallways of government start spreading into policy, written or unwritten. The impact of a declining economy to the fragile psychology of South African blacks cannot be underestimated. This is the catalyst that prompted me to write this message originally. Believe me, I am trying to help, but I am drowned out. I am truly sorry and embarrassed for the black people of my country. Embarrassed that they are trapped by the past and unable to see how to take true forward steps. A forward step to me means build a strong, healthy economy, healthy functioning government, robust education and police system. Bring integrity back to government. Bring back the death penalty. But do it smart by using advanced concepts and higher level planning and thinking. And stop stealing land from people who worked hard for it. There is lots of land the government is sitting on that should be made available for purchase. Whites and other minorities impacted, I implore you to prepare for the worst. Stay on guard, defend yourselves, dig in, make plans to leave if you have to. I fear for you. I fear for all of us in our Rainbow Nation. Even more concerning, the black-on-black violence will dwarf the violence we have seen against our minorities. This is the most disappointing thing to me. How can we call ourselves civilized if we consistently are killing ourselves? We must address this so that we can pull ourselves back to being a first world country and forge the way by setting a good example for other African countries. The country has not hit a low yet, but eventually will. Dark times will descend upon us. Then I am hopeful after that it might improve, as the everyday black man understands that we all breathe the same African air and hear the same song of the African bird, smell the same rain-soaked earth. There is no conspiracy against us. All walls, barriers, hurdles are purely in our own minds. They are preconceptions, misconceptions, bias, and unfortunately, the common ingredient is racism and intolerance for minorities, pure and simple. Government-sponsored racism is the undercurrent that is poisoning our black minds, young and old. It is fueling our continual blame of others when we look at our failed black state. It is fueling our lack of accountability accountability for our actions. I pray all the racism and discrimination melt away as South African blacks emerge from their cocoon of bitterness as a beautiful butterfly, truly free, with poise and confidence to start to channel our energy into really building our country together. Then there will be a sign and better times will return. I pray every day for this moment, and I wish you join me in prayer too. Now that is by a black man. And if the majority of blacks thought that same way, things would change in South Africa. But that itself gives me hope that things are going to change. Because if black, educated businessmen are stepping out of their danger zone, because this man has to have a target on his back, he has to be in danger from the government. And yet every day he speaks out like that, trying to convince other black people to see the light.
Yeah, no, it's a very good part that he wrote that, Karin. And, I also want to mention there are many good black people out there here in South Africa. And then, it would be unjust and not to mention that. There are many good black people, many good Asian people, and brown people, colored people. But I have to add, they're in the minority. And because the government is a black majority government, a black nationalist government, they are the leaders, and they're supposedly the leaders, supposedly to be leaders of everybody. But they're not. Many of the leaders in government are leading just a certain black nationalistic viewpoint. And when you have bad leadership, a lot of the poor, uneducated people, which is mostly black, they follow these leaders. And they follow these bad leaders. And they sometimes governments work on the power of assumption. And if you're not very educated, you can make some pretty bad assumptions. And if you're in the majority, a majority can make some pretty bad assumptions. And it can have big repercussions for minorities and for the country's future. But again, not many, a lot of good black people out there. It's just they're minority, and many are scared, which is also understandable. But, we have to mention that as well.
Well, that is why I wanted to read that piece, Henri, because you said that many blacks were better off under the apartheid rule, and even they are saying that. But for a black man to stand up and say, the blacks are the racists. Now, it is understood worldwide that to be black is to be non-racist. You cannot be a racist if you are black. So this man's writings and this man's cry to his own people always hits me in the heart, because that is what we need, and that is what the Rainbow Nation was supposed to have been.
Oh, yes. We will only go forward when we start recognizing, and let's put everything aside and we say, yes, we are all people. It doesn't matter what color or religion or whatever you are. But when it comes to this ideology of these Marxists and this ideology that a lot of African countries has adopted, it creates a them and us perception. So we will only start moving forward when people take responsibility, and in this case, black people start saying, hey, we're also racist. It's not just white people. But, we know that because if we know about xenophobia,
yes,
where black people attack other black people, that's just another form of racism. But, black on white, you get black on white racism as well. And what I mentioned last time is hate crimes, which Americans and British people are familiar with. But we don't have those laws in South Africa. And most of the crimes are hate crimes against white people, because we are a minority, and that minority is living in an area where he stands out like a sore thumb, for instance. And those are characteristics where you can measure a hate crime, because I know the FBI in the U.S. they studied hate crimes. So you can actually measure the whole thing. And it's only one I know where you can measure the crime to say, all right, these requirements are needed before we can call this a hate crime. And if you take that FBI list and you look at the crime that happened in South Africa, the black on white crime that we know, then they all check the check boxes of hate crimes.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. I mean, how can it not be a hate crime when you torture an entire family for 3 days? How can it not be a hate crime when you do not burgle their house until they are at home? You make sure they're at home first. So, that in anybody's mind, that has to qualify as hatred. But
so I mean, but all people are equal, but then you want to tell me that only white people can hate people? But then we're not equal. Then, or the new thing that I'm seeing, what's happening with everything changing at the moment, is we're seeing upcoming, I even want to say, black supremacy. It's a black supremacy where black people are in power, and they call the shots even if they're in the wrong, where they can control other minorities that's not black. So we've been through the white supremacy thing, and now with a lot of black people not admitting to racism, I can already see that we're entering a new phase in our human history, where we're going to go to black supremacy, but the only people that can really stop this are black people. Black people need to speak up, and black people need to say, and say, look, we can also be racist, and these things are racist, and they should speak up when they see something racist happening to white people. Because in the past, if we look at history, it was white people that spoke up against white people committing racism against black people. Now it's the time of black people to speak up. And until that doesn't happen worldwide and people in the US or South Africa starts doing it, I don't see very good times ahead, because we're going to get friction somewhere in a bad way, and it's not going to be pretty.
That's what I fear the most, Henri, because the Afrikaner has, I believe, 4 times in history given over his part of South Africa without a fight. He has said, okay, for the sake of peace, okay, we don't want to fight, we don't want to rule the blacks, we don't want to rule the world, we just want a place to live in peace. So
that's right.
1992 was the final time, the most recent time that we have done that. Voted our entire country, handed it over on a silver platter, given them the keys and said, ruin it. Literally, that's what we did. Now, we don't own that country anymore. So is it not the time for the blacks to stand up in good faith, as the whites have done 4 times, and say, okay, we accept that you belong here. We accept that we need your creativity and your labor and your education and your Western ideas, because we want that. So with that comes a wanting of you, so that you can maintain it and continue to create and make things good. So is it not their turn to now say, okay, I am a Zulu, or I am a Venda, or I am a Sotho, or I am whatever, but above and beyond that, I am a proud South African.
Yes, that's right. And in an ideal world, you would think that is what somebody in a leadership position would want to do. But when we come back, what you spoke to earlier again, it's about power now. It's about conquer and divide. And then these guys in power, they need to have an enemy. And they've got to keep the struggle their struggle alive, and the white man was part of the struggle. So we can't be turned into nice guys now or be embraced, for example. I think it's and because about losing power, because you've got to keep that constant fear, that constant hate going to stay in power, and because they're losing power, and that's probably where it comes from. It's not about the best of the people. It's not about the best for the country. It's about staying in power. And that's what we've seen in many African countries. And that's so sad because, again, Africa adopted the Marxist ideology. And that's got a lot to blame for this victimhood mentality, because that's what Marxism is about. It's about entitlement. And, that's the one thing that Afrikaners didn't adopt is this ideology. We're so totally against this ideology because we believe in taking responsibility and pulling ourselves up from our circumstances. And this government has adopted just the opposite. And maybe there are, I've got to add, maybe there are good people in this government. I'm sure there is. But as the main body, and whoever's beating the drum with the big guys, it just doesn't look like that.
No, it doesn't. And what worries me is that watching the slide, and the slide downwards going faster and faster in South Africa, what worries me is that we have another Zimbabwe on our hands, because what is to stop, I'm not saying particularly Zuma, but any black leader, what is to stop them becoming a tyrant and a dictator and an in-power for life person? Because they have shown quite categorically they don't care about the Constitution. They don't care because it's all Western paradigms. I saw this week that they're saying the Constitution was basically written by the white apartheid supremacists and it needs to be rewritten. I saw an article on that this week. So if that is the feeling amongst the top black guys, what is to stop a dictatorship happening in South Africa?
That's right. I mean, just on that note, even in America, nobody's, it looks like the left from the Democratic Party with those guys in power, they're also starting to show the same things with the Constitution in the U.S. So there's already that similarities in how these left-wing people see the Constitution. And when we get another leader in, it can just become ink on a piece of paper again. I mean, it's a different value system. It's been proven over time that the Constitution works, and we've got the most liberal Constitution. But again, it's only as strong as your police and your army and your government that actually upholds that piece of paper. If they don't uphold it, it's just a piece of paper.
So that is kind of my worry, one of many about South Africa. That I'm sure Mugabe was never intended to be a lifelong dictator, but it became that way simply because of the black masses. And even though there are factions that don't want him there, they have been unable to get rid of him because they just kill off any opposition. So that is another possible future for South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, that's where Mugabe in Zimbabwe came. There was a certain time, I think here in the late 90s, when there was a possibility with that Chivarangai, the opposition party, that could have taken over Zimbabwe. But now we're sitting, I'm jokingly probably, but maybe I'm not even joking, half of Zimbabwe's population in South Africa.
Yes.
And then there was that great time for opposition to take over. But Mugabe has totally played heavy-handed, dirty tactics. And it was a golden opportunity, and it's gone now. People are demoralized over there, and now Mugabe is smiling and happy and going strong, probably stronger than ever. So it was just that window period that was there that nearly could have worked, and now it's lost, and it's probably lost now forever.
Well, they did kill that poor Tsvangarai's wife and kids, and I mean, how do you stand up against something when it's the same as in the Boer War? You're fighting to protect your family first and then your country, right? And then you find your farms are burnt, your family's in a concentration camp, and in Tsvangarai's case, his family is being killed one by one. How do you continue to stand up and be a hero. And
yeah, precisely. I mean, your whole motivation, why you fought in the war for your family, your children, they are killed. All that motivation is gone. All that. So yeah, the same with him probably. I mean, must have been a huge setback for him. And yeah, then you just think, who's next? It might be other ones of my family, and who's there to help me? Where's the West? Where's all these promises from all these democracies in these countries to help me? It makes you wonder probably, and then you feel lost by yourself.
And give up.
Yeah, totally.
Because the thing that you were fighting for is taken away from you.
You were willing to stick out your neck and try and do whatever needed to be done, and then when your family members get killed, then things get a bit, you don't want to do it anymore.
No,
but I bet many countries, Western countries, probably promised and said, we'll support you, and there probably came nothing from that.
Yeah, you see, we're going into fairly deep philosophical things here, Henri, which is not my norm. But these are things that keep me awake in the middle of the night. I think about these things and I wonder what is to stop it. For instance, young Malema, he is a firebrand and he has an enormous following, getting bigger by the day, and they don't see him as a traitor because he is so rich and so wears suits that one suit of his will pay for them for the rest of their lives. They'll never earn that much money in their lives. They don't see it that way. They see it as, well, I could be him given half a chance, so let me work towards that. And so if he were to be instrumental in ousting Zuma as he was in ousting Mbeki, and he got to be president, do you really think that he's going to let the Constitution stand in his way?
No, not of course not. He would make he would make guys like Chavez that was in Venezuela, like Small Fry, look like Small Fry. I would think, I call him Little Idi Amin. Because he's already got his little red beret on, that it makes him look quite funny. But anyway, he's a Che wannabe because Che Guevara is one of his heroes, and all these Marxists, and like I mentioned last time again, that the listeners should go and look up these guys, was it EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, and go and look on their website, Google them, look on their website. It says on their website they are Marxists. And they support Marxism. And it's everything we are against as Christians, as patriots, as Republicans. Everything that goes against our grain, to stand up, take responsibility, all those stuff. These guys are totally the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely, because it was Malema that said that stealing from white people is actually not stealing. It's just taking what was yours to begin with. It's a redistribution of wealth. And he is firmly in favor of nationalizing everything, and I do mean everything. But then on the other hand, how can you expect somebody who failed woodwork at school, how can you expect somebody like that to understand the economics of running a country?
Precisely, and the thing is, he's not the smartest tool. Some people say he's very smart. What I can see is he's somebody that's easily manipulated by some powerful people at the top. It might be ANC individuals in the government, and there is words of people like Winnie Mandela and some other rich black socialites that's funding him. So when there's money, you can manipulate people easily, and I think people are pulling the strings. He's just a puppet.
No, absolutely, but a very influential puppet and gaining more influence every day.
Because he touches the man on the ground, the normal, uneducated guy mostly, but there's probably lots of educated people also following him. But he's a kind of, he wants to be the man of the people type of thing, and he's very successful at it if he keeps this up. And as things get tougher, Malema is promising the people the moon and the stars.
Yes.
He can't deliver the moon and the stars, but the people want to hear that because it gives them hope. And that's why guys like these win people over. It's just false promises. He will never be able to deliver.
No,
but people are desperate and things are hard, and that's the type of guys they want to listen to.
Because they have seen that the ANC is not delivering on those same promises. So they are willing to now change horses mid-race and go with Malema because, well, the ANC didn't deliver, but maybe the EFF will.
Yeah, well, that's what they're probably hoping, and they probably want them into power, but they only, we know it's not gonna happen, even when they do get into power. But, as ignorant people are sometimes maybe very naive, they want them into power, and only after they see what's going to happen, only then, they will see these people can't deliver, and then they'll probably be in a much worse state than before.
Absolutely, Henri, because that is very scary. Because bad as things are under the ANC, under the EFF, I can't even think about where we're going to go then.
No, definitely not. But maybe, like I sometimes say with Afrikaners, we, sometimes we need to have it tougher to really, bring forward our leadership to show what we're on about. Maybe it's the same for black people. They need to really start crunching those bones to really understand. They don't have it so hard after all. It's still good, but it can get much worse. But until they've not been there and experienced that it is worse, they won't believe it. They still have to walk that walk. But unfortunately, they're going to take everybody with them. And we just have to follow as Afrikaners in this current state. And that's why we need our own little place where we can call the shots over our own people.
I'm beginning to see that more and more, because the implementation of Mandarin as a subject in schools, the determination now that a black language must be learned at school, this is all to oust Afrikaans altogether, because during my school days it was always English Afrikaans. You had to learn, and those were, you passed that or you failed, end of story. So now we're going to bring in Mandarin, which is definitely not one of the languages of Africa, and we're going to bring in a black language, which I agree with. But that is also going to be another huge fight. Which language is going to be taught in school? Is it going to be Zulu? Is it going to be Sotho? Is it going to be... So there's going to be another huge fight about that. And more reason for the school kids to burn schools down because, well, I speak Xhosa, and now I have to learn Zulu. It is just... It would appear that from the top down, they're bringing in more and more divisive factors.
Yeah, the ANC is trying to fix things that's not really broken at all. And in the process, they just break things more and more. Like I told you the last time about that Skittles advertisement, everything they touch turns to Skittles, in my opinion. They just dividing the people more. Afrikaans people is actually motivating black people more and saying, look, to use us an example and start fighting for your language. Don't pull other languages down. Rather, pull your language up to our language, to the same level. We will help you.
Yes. But for me, this whole thing of people being equal is not uplifting people to a higher level. It's pushing everybody down to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the schools, the passing rate that's so low in the 30s. In my days, I think it was, you had to really at 40, and the real the lowest mark to fail was 33.3%, and then you really had to be really bad at it. But I think it's now even lower. It's just, everybody is just being dumbed down more. A kid coming out of school now with high school, I don't even understand how they will ever find a job. These kids, some of these kids can't spell, they can't do sums, and they're already in high school.
Yeah, even if there were jobs to be had, they wouldn't be employed.
That's right, because the ANC is not creating jobs. It's taking jobs that's already there, taking it as an affirmative action job, so it waits till the white guy leaves, and then it says, okay, it's now reserved for black people, and now they created a job.
Yeah, fantastic job creation. So the other thing I would like to talk to you about, Henri, is I read this week, in the same lengthy, ridiculous speech that Zuma made at this meeting this week, he has stated that as of next year, every company, whether foreign or not, will have to sell 51% of its shareholding to blacks or get out the country. What is the impact of that going to be?
Gee, I mean, can you just imagine? I've got a business I've been running for years, and now I've got to give more than half of it to a person that I don't know, just because they feel they're entitled to it. No way. Then I'm going to say, screw you. I'm taking my business elsewhere. Just as plain as that.
But Henri, imagine an international company like Ford or Chev or Volkswagen or any of those big companies that employ thousands upon thousands of South Africans. They are ruled by foreign people. They have a board of directors. They have shareholders. They cannot take that decision to give 51% to black shareholding because they can't do that. So
no, they can't.
What is going to happen?
People are just going to withdraw their money, or they take their business elsewhere. There's not going to be jobs anymore. People are going to get more frustrated. People are going to probably take it out on minorities, and we white people are going to get blamed for people not getting jobs. You know, your mind could just go haywire off of the possibilities. It's just it's a horrendous thought of what could happen, because obviously the government is getting desperate. It's not getting enough jobs in the country, so it's making more some race law of black economic empowerment or something, and they get more less jobs, and they get more desperate, and they make another law. You know, it's just can't these guys see what they're doing? You want a free. If you look at the world economy at this stage, this government in this country is not in a state to make demands. It should take what it can get from the outside if people wants to invest money here. This country is not in that position because the world is not in a great position at this moment.
No, but they do not seem to see the impact of these rules that they're making. Because look at tourism. Since they changed the visa rules, that you have to have an unabridged birth certificate if you bring a minor into or out of the country. Now, they have already lost billions in tourism because of that.
Yeah, they said, and lots of thousands of tourists they lost because of that. There was another rule where you had to prove when you bring in children now that you had to have letters from the father and the mother and the police and the embassy, and then people just didn't want to go through all that trouble anymore. So they lost a lot of people. I can understand why they did it. Because I think it was because South Africa has a problem with child trafficking as well. But yeah, I think a lot of these things are not thought through, heaven knows what sometimes the people that, you know, I think one of these ministers that I read the other day also he faked his university degree.
Yeah, well, how many of them have done that? How many of them have done that? I mean, it's frightening that Henri, if you're a black person, a white person, and you go to an interview, you have to provide practically what color toilet paper you use, or they background check you. You know, really, that's practically how it is. So how is it possible that you get to be the head of the railway system in South Africa with a fake education?
Yes, that's right. And just this week, a colonel, him and his wife disappeared, a colonel in the army. He was, in 1996, he was part of an armed gang, and he was sentenced to jail. And then nobody heard from him again, and the next moment he's a colonel in the South African army. You know,
Yeah.
But obviously he knew people in high places that pulled strings for him.
And then when they found out, oh, shock, horror, dismay, how did this happen under our rule? But they knew about it. The man could not have been appointed. I mean, Zuma had, 700 charges against him when he became president, which have now disappeared. I think it was 700, if I read that correctly. But nevertheless, even if it was only 7, how did that disappear?
It's funny that you mention that now. And remember that time when Mandela died, Zuma had that interpreter? And everybody, when they said, well, the guy wasn't even interpreting. I mean, maybe your listeners know this story or not, but this guy was a fake interpreter on international TV showing, sign language, just stuff that he made up. And it was people on TV that was actually deaf that actually noticed, but this guy is talking gobbledygook. And then the ANC was also shock and horror. Oh, they didn't know. But and interestingly, if you went to look at them in the videos on YouTube, the same interpreter was used at the President Zuma's one of his speeches, and where he was singing that song, "Bring Me My Machine Gun to Kill the Boer." And that interpreter was standing there doing his gobbledygook, and then when he sang machine gun, he would make the sign of holding a machine gun and shooting.
Yes.
So it's just funny.
But I mean, what's scary about that is that man was standing right next to President Obama. So yes, he was just an idiot who now has his own comedy show, as I understand it. He's not even in jail for what he did. But the fact remains, the total stupidity of everything, because if he were an infiltrator out there to shoot, to assassinate other world leaders, he was right there standing next to them. Yes,
that's right. Some of the stuff and stories you read and hear from people, and it's just, like they say, facts are stranger than fiction in this country. Sometimes you cannot tell international people some of the stories here because they wouldn't take you serious.
No, they don't. They don't believe it, Henri, because that is a wall I come up against all the time. After a program like this, I will get 1 million emails. And it'll be, no, you said X, Y, and Z. No. Well, I'm not hosting a comedy hour here. I'm trying really hard to let the world see. But what an absolute, as you say, it's not even a banana republic. It is beyond fourth world, if there were such a thing. And we are trying to save it.
Yeah, the thing is, we're trying, but the listeners and the people, international community, if they don't believe some of the stuff we say, it makes it just so much harder. But then again, if you've traveled places and you lived in countries, you can compare apples with apples. But if you haven't traveled much, like somebody maybe, let's say, for example, sitting in the US, that person is just making up an assumption of what he thinks happens in another country, or somebody sitting in the UK or so on. It makes it more difficult to really understand the struggles people face and really get an interest into things. And then again, it does help if you're a bit open-minded and you reach out to get to know people and want to make friends with people and try and understand their history and their language. Because, if you travel a bit, people are not so much different in many ways of what they're looking for in life, and there's a lot of similarities. And if you can get those similarities, you can bond with people. And I encourage people to make friends with South Africans and try and make friends with Afrikaans people and ask them, we've got so many similarities that we can share with other people. It's just our language, when somebody's not good at English, but, you can also overcome that. But that's how you make friendships. And I think people need to realize and understand, even America's not a fortress anymore. We need to find our allies, whether in the US or Europe or America or wherever. People with the same values, people with the same fears and a love for family and so forth. They need to join forces, because in each place you're going to become a minority in some way. Even if you're majority, you're going to be maybe a minority in a room one day when you have an opinion. Join forces with people with the same views as you and the same values, and that's already, and that goes across borders. I cannot emphasize that enough.
I absolutely agree with you, Henri, because the Afrikaner is a really, really good person. Every race of people has bad apples, okay? I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
But in general, the Afrikaner is somebody who I am proud to be friends with, who I would want to employ, who I would want at my side in a battle, who I would want to have my back, and who I would want to pray with, because they are the staunchest allies anyone could ever get. They have a unbelievable work ethic. They're stubborn, they're hard-headed, and they're argumentative. Yes. But my goodness, is that not better than having no opinion about anything? Is that not better than being a yes man? They are creative. A boer maak 'n plan. An Afrikaner makes a plan, and an Afrikaans woman makes a plan that works. That is a staunch South African saying that I've heard from the day I could first understand anything. And no matter where in the world they go, that is true of an Afrikaner.
Oh, yes. And I mean, if you want somebody to cover your back, yes, I think you will get a loyal person that you can trust to cover your back. And like you mentioned, yes, we also have our bad apples like everywhere else, and you're probably going to get a few that probably goes against what we just said. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say that's who we are. We are hardy people. You can trust us, and we are good people. It's just many people couldn't understand our language, and we lost the propaganda war. And unfortunately, we are also stereotyped. We're still fighting a war against being stereotyped, and hopefully that will change over time. But then again, if people get to know us, many people read propaganda stories or stories written by somebody with an agenda, and maybe that story is even true about a person or a few people. But we are nearly 4 million Afrikaners, much less than that now. But the majority of us are boring people. That's why when they take two races, for example, it's worldwide news. The rest of us are just too boring to make worldwide news because we are law-abiding, good, decent people.
Yes, to your own detriment at times, Henri, because sometimes it is necessary to stand up and shout. And yet the Afrikaner is not timid. Now, there's no way about that. You put two of them in a room, you're going to hear loud noises coming out that room eventually.
Yeah.
They are not timid. In Afrikaans they say, hy is nie op sy bek geval nie. He didn't fall on his mouth. So his mouth is ready to go. But they are polite. I read a thing, and I've been accused of this myself. One of our favorite words as a South African is sorry. We are sorry for everything. Things we didn't do, things we didn't say. Sorry comes out of our mouth all the time. We're polite to the point of being withdrawn, because we won't interrupt somebody while they're speaking. We won't break the law. We won't be rude. Which then makes me think, how can we be racist? Because we are too polite to be racist. But anyway, the Afrikaner is a good person. And yes, boring, because all they want to do is go out there, make a living, support their family, fix their car at the weekend, watch some rugby, and have a quiet life. That is really all they want to do. They don't want to be, the majority have no idea of wanting to be a millionaire and rule the world.
Yeah, I mean, people just want to get on with their lives. The majority of Afrikaners just want to get on with their lives. They want to support their family. They want to spend time with their children. And then they want to speak their language without interference. You know, our language means a lot to us. And when you start tinkering with our language, you know, and say you have to send your kid can't speak a certain language in school, or can't go to a certain school where only Afrikaans people are, you know, it starts interfering with everybody. You know, we just, you know, our own whole idea always was just to be left alone. We just want to be left alone. We just want to live our lives. But people want to rule over us. They want to control us. They want to assimilate us. You know, and it's not going to be. We're not going to give them an easy time to do that either. We're going to make it damn tough.
Yes, because together with everything else that the Afrikaner is, and I might just say South African, white South African is, not only the Afrikaner. We are proud of who we are. We are proud to be South African. We are proud to have our own language, Afrikaans, which is not spoken or anywhere else in the world. It's ours. We created that, and we deserve to keep that.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's so many things we can be proud of. A lot of achievements we made. And, you know, not like I always mention, not everything was bad under apartheid. A lot of good things happened. But again, the left just pushed this agenda that it was just this horrible thing. You know, there was people with relationships, friendships, black and white people. But, you know, it's just certain people, the left again, that's pushing this agenda that was a horrible thing. And a lot of good things happened. I mean, I had friendships with black people, and, you know, great friendships. And, you know, and my parents had great friendships with black people, and vice versa. So, you know, I really swallow hard on the whole thing when people start with this one-sided view or perception to try and make it out this horrible thing. Yes, horrible things did happen. But, you know, damn good things also did happen.
Absolutely. You know, Henri, I always say that the Afrikaans people, well, South Africans in general, are a patriarchal society. The dad is the head of the house, and his word is law because that's what the Bible teaches. And they believe that. And you're raised that way, that what your husband or your father says is law. But at the same time, they then grew that to encompass people who worked for them. In South Africa, I don't know what it's like today, but in South Africa, in my day, your maid and your gardener were part of the family.
Yes.
They were not extraneous to the family. They were people who treated them badly. We've already said that.
Yes.
But
yes.
In general, that person was your responsibility to make sure that they were housed, fed, clothed. Sometimes I know that our family made sure that the maids' children were educated and had school uniforms and shoes and Christmas presents and whatever. So the society in general, apart from the bad apples, in general, it was a good thing for everybody. And now it doesn't exist.
Yes, and I mean, all these, the left and the ANC and all these bunch of people worldwide just took the bad things of it because it went against the whole story to mention these good things. You know, it's like I mentioned sometimes, if you hate something so bad and there's two truths, you throw in 3 lies with that 2 truths, and now it becomes 5 truths to everybody. anybody, because people are so desperate to believe all this news and whatever. And that's what happened to international community outside of South Africa. They believed everything. They even believed the lies with some of the truths because they didn't know any better. And some people wanted it so much to be the truth, they wanted, believed it as the truth.
And so now, there are a handful of us are fighting a rearguard action to try and overcome that propaganda. And it is so hard because there was 40 or 50 years of lies which we are trying to turn around.
Yes, and that's not, maybe as people get more educated, because we have the internet now, hopefully people will start realizing how they were duped in the 80s. In the 80s we were not so lucky to have the internet. People just sat in front of their TVs and just believed that news guy there in front is telling him the truth and nothing but the truth. And you just sat there gullible like like a sheep, just taking it all in. And I think I can see more. Maybe it's also, I can understand more, but I can see people are becoming more aware of information, and they're starting to ask questions, and they don't just take anything as truth. And but then again, I think people are becoming more aware with the internet and the TV and so forth. But hopefully it's a newer generation of people than we had in the 80s.
Well, hopefully the newer generation of people are willing to do the research and to look into things and to educate themselves. But sadly, that's not what I'm finding. It is the older generation who is standing up and fighting and having their voices heard. The youngsters, because they're not taught their history and their values in school, and because their parents, especially in South Africa, are so desperate trying to make 2 cents to feed their family that night, they don't have the time and the energy to tell their children the stories of their history. So those are a whole dispossessed generation. And why do we expect them to do better?
Yes, I mean, a lot of this you can also blame on the government again because of the history taught in schools. The whole school education system is going down. The kids are not taught the same things we were taught. Kids are now more worried about the next party and being on their mobile phones the whole time. It's
how many likes they got on Facebook.
That's right. But then again, that's also what I meant earlier by when life is too good, because you forget what sacrifices was made in the past for you to have these freedoms and to like your Facebook and to sit, outside on the porch without any troubles. Somebody out there needed to do something bad for you to enjoy those freedoms. But as we see this everywhere with the youth in the US and UK. They forget these freedoms, what sacrifices was made to get these freedoms. But as humans, we'll probably have to get to that point again at some stage, because our memories are short when it comes to these type of things, and we repeat history. And this is probably why we will have to repeat it again, where our freedoms are lost. So we have to fight for it again, for us to understand what was done for us to have it in the first place.
Yeah, and I do believe that in South Africa, our generation, yours, you're probably a bit younger than me, but our generation, our sons, brothers, were the last generation to actually go and fight for those freedoms. So a whole generation has now grown up and had children that never had to face that reality of going to war to defend the freedoms of the people at home. And I think, yes, one tends to forget. If it hasn't happened to you, it hasn't happened, seems to be the kind of general thing. So until they actually have to stand up and defend their families, their freedoms, they're not going to understand it.
That's right. No, you're absolutely right there, Karin. And it seems like, it would be really sad for us to going back to the basics again for our youth to understand that. But if you look at the way the world's going at the moment, things are getting very shaky. And if anything did happen, I'm not sure what we can do with a bunch of kids that's on Facebook.
Yeah.
To get back those freedoms, to be honest.
Absolutely. And it's sad. It's sad because our boys, including yourself, all fought so that our kids and grandchildren didn't have to.
Yes, absolutely. I spoke to somebody online once, and I said I was a soldier that made you sleep safe at night, and she said, "You didn't do anything for me. So don't tell me you did anything for me to sleep safe." And that's probably the mentality of some people, because you keep bad things out, you see bad things, and you realize there's people there sleeping somewhere that's not seeing these things. They don't know what the heck's going on, and that false sense of security becomes arrogance, and then that's probably what happened to that woman. She became arrogant because of the sacrifice other people made for her, as in that case she was a white person.
Yes, Henri, we have very little time left, but I would just like to say this, that no matter where you are in the world today, the USA, Europe, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, you need to remember that the freedoms that you are so freely giving away today were bought at enormous cost. People paid with their blood, with their lives, with their limbs. They paid for you to live the life you live today. And they paid it willingly so that you do not have to go and fight those fights. So if you are not prepared to stand up today from behind your phone, your computer, your whatever, and say this is not right, then my biggest fear is that your generation, is going to have to pay in blood the same as mine did. So, Henri, we have 2 minutes left. Do you have a closing thought? And please mention your website.
Yeah, I just want to say listeners can contact me. They're welcome to contact me on Facebook. If they've got any questions, I'm always happy to make new friends. If you want to know more about South Africa, and please go and visit my website. It's www.henrileriche.com. And they can also maybe just contact you, Karin. But thank you very much for being on your show. I appreciate it. And hopefully there's somebody, help us in some way or form.
Yes, well, that is our endless hope, Henri. It's the only reason I continue doing this, because there are many, many, many days when I say, damn it, I'm a grandma, I'm disabled, I ought to be enjoying my golden years with my grandchildren, and this kind of stress is not what is required. But then again, I see something or speak to somebody like yourself, and I realize exactly why I am still doing this. So let's hope that somebody, somewhere, is going to hear our message that can and will change things. Thank you for being on the show. As always, I am playing out with the original and only national anthem of my country, the stem.
Okay, hold it on. Yeah.